Okay, so for my historical analysis, I decided to do the 1938 publication of the Behavior of Organisms by B.F. Skinner. Throughout this presentation, I'm basically just going to give you a brief overview of Skinner's education and his work, and then go into kind of a precursor of what behavior was like before he got into his work, and then what the book contributed to, and then the aftermath of after it was published. So looking into Skinner's background, he first attended Hamilton College, where he was actually studying like English and writing. Tried to become a professional writer after graduating in 1926. 2 years later after that, he enrolled into Harvard, where he pursued and studied psychology. Obviously, his main study was behavior surrounding the ideas of operant conditioning. Later became that his famous study was through the Skinner box, or the operant conditioning chamber, that's what it's called. After finishing his doctorate, he worked as a researcher at Harvard. After that, taught at the University of Minnesota, and then in 1945 became a chairman to the psychology department at the University of Indiana. Okay, so before Skinner, here's a few names up here. John Watson, who was an American psychologist, also was a founder of behaviorism, because through his research, so through his research, he also did experimental and animal psychology, which then led to child behavior, and then in 1925 had a book on behaviorism, which was a reading that Skinner read before he went into psychology. Then you had Edward Thorndike, who was an American psychologist, also did animal behavior through the learning process, had the theory of connection, behavioral responses to stimuli through trial and error. He was the one that invented the puzzle box, which had to do with putting a cat inside of a kind of a maze, and then they got food for getting out. And through trial and error, like he'd put the cat through it more times, and each time they would get out quicker. Another one is Ivan Pavlov, who is a Russian psychologist. His ideas revolve mainly around classical conditioning through conditioned reflexes. He did the study around dogs and salvation. So with the bell, he would ring a bell, give them food every time, and then if you took the food away and rang the bell, the dogs would still salivate. Here's where Skinner's work came into play. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, through operant conditioning chamber and the Skinner box. Here he was used to record animals in a compressed time frame. These animals would either be punished or rewarded based on their behaviors. So this has to do with positive and negative reinforcements, and then positive and negative punishments. This brought through the theory of learning. So through operant conditioning, behaviors are produced and conditioned through their reinforcements. And then there's two behaviors, one being operant, which is under our own control, and the other one being respondent, which is reflexively and automatically. So here's a little explanation of the Skinner box for anybody who doesn't know. This was the one where he did with conducting with rats. He would put them inside, which would isolate them from their external environment. There was a lever inside that basically, if it pushed it, it would give it food. But depending on what Skinner would do was he'd put kind of the reinforcement in there. Right here you had light signals or sound. Sometimes it would give it food, sometimes it wouldn't. It just kind of let Skinner, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Let Skinner control the environment of what the rat was in, instead of just observing it in its natural environment. So through the publication from the book, Skinner defines the behavior in the organisms as observing what other organisms are doing, and through one's own doing through the outside world is the desire deal with the effects. So behavior is your environment, and then from that, your consequences is your likelihood of repeating it. So what this this book contributed to, was considered a landmark for the behavior and experimental analysis. Like I kind of mentioned before, had to do with Skinner controlling the environment. The analysis gave a huge contribution to the technology of behavior. His laboratory research helped coin the establishment of psychology as a natural science that's putting it along with like biology, chemistry. Changes after the publication to psychology, a lot of it had to do with schooling, parenting, diagnoses and treatments, work, sales and marketing, and then I put in the criminal justice system. So like for schooling, a lot of it had to do with kind of showing how kids can be reinforced to get their work done, that or a punishment is induced. Parenting would obviously change how different parenting styles and how they would bring up their children. Treatment options, this brought in a huge contribution to like cognitive behavioral therapy. Through work, you see it with like just incentives to get things done, the hiring process, giving people incentives to come work for them, that ties into play. Sales and marketing, we've talked about that in class before. That dealt with how you get people to buy things, the positive versus negative effects of not getting it, and how it sticks in your mind. And then I put the criminal justice system down as far as like punishment and rehabilitation. Obviously, throughout the years, we've seen different types of punishments from dating way back as far as the death penalty and stuff like that, and then implementing different factors as far as to trying to keep people from reoffending and going back through the system. And that's all I have. Questions? Questions?
In researching this, I mean, we've all heard of B.F. Skinner, we all kind of know this, right? It's kind of that. What surprised you in your research? Like, what was something, like a detail or something that you were like, wow, this is something I'd never learned about, or this is really important?
I guess looking into Skinner's, like not just his, the box with doing it on rats, I learned a little bit. It was around World War II when he did the pigeon project, which dealt with the conditioning of pigeons. It was a little bit different. They had like a button they pushed by pecking it, and it was like, that was really when like Skinner branched out from just doing laboratory experiments to like doing experiments that actually had effect in like the society, or like not effect, but like, you know, World War II was a big crisis going on at the time, so he was doing work to try and help out during the war and stuff like that. So I guess that was one thing that I found kind of interesting.
Do you think his theory still has as big of an impact as it did back in the 50s when he put it out?
I'd say it's still there. I don't know if I'd necessarily say it's, I guess it's still impacting. I wouldn't say it's just seen as much. Yes. I don't know. By researching it, I guess, like, I learned a lot about it. I don't hear about it. I see it a lot, but I guess I just don't think about it being Skinner's work.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I could definitely, after research, like, see how it is implemented through the society and stuff like that.
So it's just almost embedded so much that we don't even see it anymore
Yeah.
as that.
Other than when it was first established.